Okay, welcome, and in this particular context, I wish you a very happy Pesach, with for yourselves and health and your families, and just may it be a time of blessing. And I'm going to start with a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Here we are.
And can we dedicate this to my dad, or is that only when?
Absolutely. So, and we are just because this is Lauren's dad's yard site. Did you say seventh yard site, Lauren?
Mhm. Yes.
We are dedicating this lesson, this shiur, to his memory, le'ilui mishnato, so that for the elevation of his memory. Lauren, do you want to say a little something about him before we start the lesson? Why don't we have?
Yeah, sure. I mean, what he's primarily known for is his civil rights and civil liberties work in Savannah, Georgia. But that just really is just scratching the surface of all the things he did for all the people he could do things for. And what I talked about yesterday in services was that his parents set an example during the Depression, when they had a um, wholesale grocery business. They would let people have as much food and supplies as they needed on credit without really ever mentioning it again and not trying to collect. And my dad did the same thing as a lawyer. And when people approached him who were indigent, he didn't turn them away because they couldn't afford to pay him. If they needed help, he was there to help them. And sometimes people would bring, like farmers or people would bring produce and put it on the doorstep, as a thank you. But he would not. He was just always doing things for anybody who needed help. So growing up in Savannah, my siblings and I were often approached by strangers of all ages and races who were thanking us, and telling us really wonderful things about my dad and his family, because they recognized us as being part of that family. It was a wonderful family to be part of.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. I was, as you were sort of saying this, it occurred to me from my own experiences that having a good attorney is like having a wonderful doctor, that when you're facing a lawsuit of any kind, legal actions, it feels the same kind of feelings you have when you engage in a serious illness. And having someone who's your advocate is just amazing.
Well, and his friends were all like that too. He networked with friends that were all professionals that would do things for anybody. So he had friends who were grocers who integrated, earlier than other businesses, and friends who were bankers who worked to integrate banking practices, and just all kinds of, all his friends were all doing these kinds of things with him, and supporting, Savannah's integration as much as possible.
Let's have his name, please, in English and Hebrew.
Aaron Levy Bushbaum, and his name would be then Aharon ben Yechiel Yeshurin Halevi Sarah. His mother did not have a middle name.
Okay, thank you. Vezot Torat HaMincha. So you see we're onto a new subject, right? This is the instruction regarding the Mincha offering. This is the meal offering. And it's interesting, while it refers to an offering made out of flour, right, from grains, nevertheless, the word Mincha itself has several other meanings. One is a gift, and nacha means to lay down, something like that. So mincha represents the time of day when the sun is past zenith and starts to set. So mincha is set in the west, and that's why the mincha service is called the mincha service. It's referring to the fact that the sun is now moving towards setting in the sky. So, so this is the instruction concerning the mincha and hakrev ota, offer it up, bring it, draw it near, bring it near. Bnei Aharon, the sons of Aaron, should bring it, offer it up, lifnei Hashem, before Hashem, el pnei hamizbeach, at the front, the face of the altar. And we discussed this yesterday, and I gave you an illustration to look at of the altar so that you could see exactly how this works out. So we're going to go on. Veherim mimenu bekumtso. So he should, herim is to lift up, right? Lift up from it, mimenu, from it, bekumtso, by in pinching it. And I think I showed you how that kmitza is made with the three fingers like this, where he pinched it like this and took it. And apparently that was a very difficult thing, very difficult act. They had to learn how and train how to actually do it. So he'd have the mincha, and from it he would take a pinch of this. The solet is fine flour. The solet hamincha, from the solet, this fine flour of the mincha, mishamna, and from its oil. So I would imagine that it was pure olive oil that was added to the grain. The et kol, we did do this first, but I still think we should review it, right? The et kol halevona, and all the frankincense, asher al hamincha, which is on the grain. So I believe what it's describing for us is that on the bottom we have a bowl that has the grain in it, and that's mixed with oil, that has oil on it. Okay, it's absorbed some oil, and on top of that is the frankincense. And so when he puts his hand in there, he has to take all the grain and the oil. Rashi's going to describe this a little bit more detail, and then all the frankincense. The hiktir hamizbeach, and he should then cause it to smoke on the altar. Reach nichoach, a pleasing odor, pleasing perfume, right? Fragrance. Askarata, its remembrance part, because he's not offering up the entire mincha. He's not offering up all the flour and all the oil. He's only putting. So this is so zecher, liskor, zachor, remember. So in other words, the part of it that is a remembrance of this offering, Lashem, for Hashem. Now, what's interesting is we are going to a very modest offering. I mean, pretty much anybody could afford could afford this kind of offering. So that's it's interesting how we'll see in the context it would appear that this might be considered an extremely holy offering, because generally it's possible that the people who had to bring it in the place of another kind of an animal, for example, there's a an offering that's considered oleh v'yored, which means it is of a variety of values to go up and come down. In other words, if he was wealthy, he had to bring an animal, and if he was poor, he also had an opportunity. This person also had an opportunity for atonement and reconciliation and all the various things, but this person could only afford a mincha. And what's interesting, of course, is that only a part actually goes onto the altar. It is not, God doesn't want this person to have to donate their entire offering onto the altar. So let's take a look then at the Rashi here. And here we are, the Herim Mimenu, and he should offer up from it. Mehamechubar, that means it's all connected, right? It's all put together. Sheyehe isarun shalem, okay? That when he pinches it, it should be a tenth part of an ephah, a complete tenth part of an ephah, bevat achad. In this one pinch that he makes, he has to have in his hand this 1/10 of an ephah, Pasha'at Kmitza, at the time he takes this pinch. When he takes this, in some cases it's translated as a fistful, but it's not this kind of fistful. It's this kind of fistful. So it's a specific kind. Okay. Bekomtso, when he pinches it. Shelo ya'aseh midah lakometz. So Rashi understands this from Yoma, from the Gemara, analyzing this, that he shouldn't create a measurement. In other words, even though he's told to take an isaron, he shouldn't measure out an isaron and sort of actually work out that measurement. It sounds to me like it's supposed to be a I think, okay. Yaseh midah lakometz. In other words, and this is one of the translations that I was reading, is that he makes a measuring cup, for example, that's exactly a 10th part. So it's emphasizing that he has to, the act of pinching it, right, quite possibly would correspond to the act of slaughtering the animal, of the actual act of slaughter. So separating this out. So it's saying he should not make a vessel, right, that's of 10, that's with 10, 1/10 of an isaron, and use that to remove that amount of flour from this mincha offering. He has to do it in this way with his hand. Okay. Misolat hamincha umishamna, from the fine flour of the mincha and of its oil. Mikan shekometz. From this we learn that when he takes this pinch, he needs to do it. Mimakom shenitra beshamna. He has to take it. You see, it's all the flour is mixed with the oil, all right. But it's not like they stir it and stir it and stir it. I think they just put the oil onto the fine flour, and when he takes the chometz, he needs to take it from that part that has the most oil in it mixed with the flour. That's what it's saying. Nitraba, where most of it has collected. Okay. And again, he's giving references to the Gemara where these are found, where these analyses are found. Hamincha, so the meal offering. And this is now this is not the Gemara, this is Torah Kohanim. This is from this midrash, that's what is called a halachic midrash, which goes through the book of Leviticus and analyzes each verse and it extracts these meanings and these halachot from the verses.
So what I have here says, by the way, that the first two were from Torah Kohanim as well. And that the third one, the one you just read, was from Sota.
Right. So according to this text, it's in Yoma, and I don't know if they're parallel passages, in the sorry.
Yeah, they all say chapter 6, verse 27 for Torah Kohanim.
Yes. Okay. There's no reason that they may not be parallel passages. Okay, because it looks as if the Torah Kohanim, in the development of the approach of the Gemara, that it may have started off as this halachic midrash, and then what the Gemara does is it integrates it it takes it onto another level, and very often when it talks about a baraita, it's quoting from one of these sources. So it's not necessary that there's a contradiction in terms of references, that you'll find them in both places, and that the Torah Kohanim represents the original source of this interpretation. So, ha-mincha, the meal offering, shelo tahei me'urevet ba'acheret, that you can't mix up menachot. It has to be the specific mincha, because they're all we may have a bunch of menachot to offer, but you cannot mix them together when you're performing this service. Ve'et kol halavona asher hamincha vehiktir. So he's actually running the sentence, a little bit, right? All the frankincense which is on the mincha, on the meal offering, vehiktir, and cause it to smoke. And again, this is Torah Kohanim. Shemalaket elevonata, he collects its frankincense, la'achar kamitza, after he has pinched the flour and the oil, umaktiro, and then causes it to smoke. Ulafisha lo piresh chen ela be'achat min hamenachot, and because he did not explain this in this way, except in one of the menachot b'vayikra, in Parsha Vayikra, it only made these specifications about the oil and the frankincense and how it had to be done to cause it to smoke on the altar. It only referred to one mincha, right? You might have thought that was the only mincha where this service was performed. Hutzrach l'shanot parsha zo. He needed to teach it in this particular paragraph. And of course, l'shanot doesn't only mean to teach. V'shinantam levanecha, right? You shall teach it to your children. It also means to go over it. So he's repeating it a second time in this parsha. Lichlol kol hamenachot kamishpatam, that all to include lichlol, to include all the meal offerings kamishpatam, according to their service, their ordinances, the rules, according to all these rules. Okay. Give me one moment. I see there's material in the chat. Okay. All right. Yes. So going on to verse 9. V'hanoteret mimena. And of course, remember, he's only taken a pinch of all the meal, the flour that he has brought as an offering. And he says, V'hanoteret mimena. And that which remains of it, yochlu Aharon uvanav. Aaron and his sons should eat it. So here he is, a very poor, I imagine, a poor person. At least that's not necessarily, but we're talking quite often that this is the kind of offering he'd be able to bring, and it's giving him the honor that the priests still eat of this meal offering. That just because it's a poor person's offering doesn't mean that it's treated with any disrespect or treated any less respectfully than if he had brought an animal. Okay. Matzot te'achel. This is kind of nice, right? Because that's where we're heading, right? He should eat them as wafers. B'makom kadosh, in a holy place. So you understand the consuming of this part of the meal offering had to be done as a sacred act. It isn't just leftovers. This act of eating is done in a sanctified way, in a special way. Sorry, did I go too far? Did I miss out something? No? Okay, in a holy place. Oh, sorry, finishing up the main sentence. The Chatzar Ohel Moed Yochlua. So where is this holy place? In the courtyard of the Ohel Moed, of the tent of meeting. Yochluha, they should eat it. You know, and the repetition there says, this is where they must eat it. To do anything less would be a sin. They have a responsibility to do it in this very mindful kind of way. The Ezahu, so Rashi's just explaining how the sentence is put together. In other words, where is this holy place? B'chatzar ohel moed, in the courtyard of the tent of meeting. So, lo te'afeh chametz, it should not be baked and leaven. It should not be baked leaven. Chelkam natati ota, I gave it to them. Natati ota, I have given it to them. Chelkam, as their portion, may ishai, from my fire offerings. And look at this. Kodesh Kodashim He. It is considered a most holy gift, holy of holies, kechatat, just like a sin offering, and then ka'asham, and like a guilt offering. And the significance of adding that, Rashi is going to explain to us. So, so not allowing the offering to become leaven was, as you can see, it's a significant theme. And in case you're not familiar, we understand the leavening. Essentially, what happens is that when bread is leavened, it means it rises. And we know that the sort of rising is caused by tiny little pockets of air in the batter, and that from the yeast, that they're these tiny little pockets of air, and that puffs up the dough and the batter. And that is seen symbolically, since the human body is symbolically is symbolized by bread, by a loaf of bread, and that goes back to the creation of human beings when God originally formed man, and it says God took the dust of the earth and mixed it with water and formed the human being. By the way, there's a lot of symbolism involved in that, but the dust of the earth can be compared to the flour, and the water, of course, is the water, and so the batter, and so the puffing up has to do with arrogance. That's the issue. And that human arrogance is, it's not altogether bad. You need to feel confident in if you're going to get anything done, but not to allow yourself also to have a sense of humility prevents you from being open to the divine element of creation. And that's one of the reasons why we don't eat chametz during Pesach, because during that original Pesach, God, the divine element, was extremely manifest. And so by not eating chametz ourselves, we're trying to reduce the amount of arrogance that we have in our lives. And in fact, of course, on Pesach, you pretty much have to get rid of any sense of arrogance, because you're told to get rid of any vestige of chametz in your home. So this is a very powerful symbol of being connected to God, and that's why I think it can be described as Kodesh Kodashim. And
So
it's
we're trying to increase the presence of God by decreasing the presence of ourselves and making room.
correct. The arrogance acts as a barrier. The more important you think you are, automatically, the less important you think God is in your life. So just a little bit more, we'll do the Rashi and then we'll conclude. So you shall not bake it leaven, chelkam, their portion. And this is again interesting. There's a tractate called Menachot, right? Af hashirayim. So he's saying, even the leftovers, things that are left over from this, asurim bechametz, are forbidden to be leavened. So nothing. So I will tell you that when he says shirayim, I assume he's talking about the part that's left over from the kamitzah, but it could be referring to something else. But again, this would require, I would need to be able to look at menachot and check what exactly are they referring to, because it is the part that they're eating, right? So kechatat, as the chatat, like the sin offering. This is significant. So here, ukesha asham, and like the guilt offering. Here, minchat, manchat choteh. So there are times when a sinner has to bring a mincha as part of their atonement and as part of us. It might accompany a sin offering. It might be, if the person can't afford the sin offering, it may simply be a mincha offering, and that's it. Hare hi kachatat. So God is saying, the Torah is saying here, that this meal offering is equivalent to the chatat, the animal, Lefichach, and for this reason, kamtza shelo lishma. When he took this pinch, as I said, it's like the act of slaughtering. And when he does that act, he has to do it with the intention of this being a sin offering and following the laws of the sin offering in the case of an animal. But if he does not when he takes the kmitza, he doesn't do it with that intent. The priest does not do it at that for the intent of bringing a sin offering. Psula, it is no longer valid. It is invalid. But the reason why I talked about an asham, minchat nedava, on the other hand, if he's simply bringing a meal offering as a free will offering, he wants to be able to make a gift, right? Harehi asham. In that case, it is like a guilt offering, like an asham, and lefichach, and as a result, kamtsa shelo lishma. When he pinched it, he did it without necessarily fully intending it as an asham kshera, it is still acceptable. It is not invalid. And I will stop the share at this point, and we have a couple of minutes to discuss this. You can tell me your impressions. So, any thoughts about this?
A little confused by the last part of what you just said about what makes it invalid and what doesn't make it invalid.
So the part of the act involves your intention.
Right.
Your intention is very much part of an act. So, and I'm not saying that this doesn't require further elucidation for me as well, but my understanding is that when he brings it as a chatat, he has to, and possibly some of that is saying it's l'shem chatat, that he's articulating that it has to be for the sake of a chatat offering. All right. When it's a mincha nedava, apparently when you brought an asham, it wasn't necessary for the priest to actually perhaps say it out loud. Again, I would have to go back and double check, and it's possible that Torah Temimah has, he spells it out more. But if he didn't do that, it still was considered a valid offering. Whereas in the case of the chatat, it wasn't. And I'm speculating that if he doesn't say this is a minchat nedava, right, it's still a valid. He doesn't have to say that if the person's bringing it as simply a free will offering, this meal offering. So I feel that I'm trying to clarify it for both of us, for all of us, but this requires further research to clarify it, with certainty. And we will end with this. That's why it's a constant, ongoing study for clarification and, again, the deconstruction all the way through. So if you weren't following it entirely, clearly you were paying attention. So thank you. So I'm going to stop.